Hey guys, welcome back. I'm still in the process of moving out of my shop, and it's really hot today. It's been hot for like a week and a half now. The whole time we've been moving, it's been over 90 degrees Fahrenheit, so that's pretty hot for around here, especially when it's 75% humidity. Anyway, I'm taking a little break in the shade, and I thought I would make a quick video about my old shop. So maybe we can do a quick tour, and I'll try to answer a few questions that frequently come up in my videos. So a little bit of background on my shop. I've been down here in this location for almost 6.5 years. And before that, I rented a smaller shop just down the road. I think I was there for, I don't know, 2.5 years, something like that. Anyway, I rent this place. It's in an industrial complex, and I think there's about 35 to 40 businesses here at any given time. So it's a pretty happening place. And overall, I'd say it's been a good thing, but there's several reasons why I want to leave. So if you're not familiar with how industrial or commercial rental works, I'll give you guys a little bit of an insight. It really sucks. I've said it before. It has all the drawbacks of ownership and none of the benefits. So I lease my shop on what's called a triple net lease, and that basically means that I pay the rent, the utilities, and the property taxes. And that's very common for commercial rental, and there's not much you can do to get around it. Normally with residential rentals, you don't have to pay the property taxes. That's the landlord's problem. But for whatever reason, for commercial property, it's on you. Now the other thing that sucks too is, if you rent a house or a residential property, there's, consumer protections for you. You can't be evicted without notice. You have, rights basically. And consumer protections. Your landlord has to put your deposit into an account that accrues interest. They have to pay that deposit back to you with interest, etc., etc. In the commercial world, none of that is true, and you're basically on your own. So keep that in mind. The other thing is the repairs. Basically, in my shop, if anything is under $500, it's my problem, and it only when it exceeds $500 does it become the landlord's problem. And that's basically limited to things inside. As far as structural elements or things outside of the building, that's his problem. But like the furnace or water heater, things like that, water damage, that's all on me. So that's not ideal, but that's very common in the commercial rental world. Like I said, all the drawbacks of ownership and none of the benefits. You're not building any equity. And I shudder to think about what I've paid in rent down here. There's a few other, kind of major problems down here, and I'll show you. It'll be more clear when we walk around. The parking is a nightmare. Access to my building is somewhat of a problem, and kind of one of the bigger problems too is that the guy who owns this place, he's an old man. He's well into his 70s, and I think he's starting to kind of lose it a little bit. To the point that he comes and asks me where electrical lines are run and questions about the plumbing and stuff. I don't even know the answer usually, but he's starting to slip. He's not here very often. A lot of times he's gone for extended periods of time in the summer, extended periods of time in the winter. He's got a property down in Florida, and he's got a deadbeat kid who's supposed to be managing the property while he's gone. I haven't seen him for months, so I'm really on my own down here, which is nice for me because I like to kind of work by myself, and basically we can do whatever we want down here. But the flip side is when you need something, there's nobody around to get help. So anyway, let me give you guys a walk around and try to answer a few questions. So probably the most common question I get is about this sound that you're hearing right now. Various theories have come up about maybe it's Rodan or maybe I live in a jungle. Nope, it's actually some kind of a countermeasure against pigeons and barn swallows nesting in this open area here. This is like they call it a breezeway, but it's a community dock. There's 2 dock doors down there, and the barn swallows and pigeons get in here really bad. So they put up these electronic, I don't know, alarms or whatever. It's supposed to sound like a falcon or a some kind of bird of prey and scare them away. Mostly all it does is just annoy the crap out of everybody. You see it, these guys got so annoyed they wrapped this one in duct tape to quiet it down. And so just in case you're curious, all that racket that they make in there to try to scare away the birds, it does nothing. It's clear full of barn swallows and pigeons. You can't park anything in there without getting bird poop all over it. So I don't know why he even bothers. Maybe he likes the ambiance. So this is my building right here. And I am fortunate enough to be on the corner. So that's my walk-in door and that's my drive-in door right there. Anyway, I'm on the corner, so I have a few extra windows and there's a couple extra perks. Mostly that I have 3 parking spaces here, and there's no real assigned parking down here, so they don't really belong to me, but most people are pretty nice about it and they more or less let me park there. Now, I'm not supposed to have the rollback truck parked here. It's supposed to be out in the back where there's a lot for trailers and stuff, but since I'm moving out, you know, what's he gonna do? Anyway, the building itself is 50 by 60, or my section of the building is 50 by 60, so 3,000 square feet, and it's about 13 feet right here to the eaves. So the overhead door is 12 by 12, and I only have 1 overhead door and 1 walk-in door. But as you can see, it's part of a much larger complex. So I think there's, I don't know, probably a dozen businesses on my side of this alleyway, another dozen on the other side, and then this other building is absolutely huge. It goes all the way around, and there's more buildings back here, and there's more buildings along the back side here. So to give you a little bit of an orientation, this group of trees right here is all that separates me from the Illinois River. Alright, let's take a walk inside. So like I said, this is my overhead door, 12 by 12. I only have 1 door. And the door isn't really the problem. The problem is there's a building right there. It's only like, I don't know, 30 feet, I think, from that building to this building. So my building is actually deeper. You know, it's 50 feet from the front to the back of the building, but it's only 30 feet in front of the building. So access to this door is pretty bad. And the landlord rented this office to the Illinois Department of Transportation, and they decided that they can park their trucks right here in front of their office. And I'm telling you what, if you can find a lazier person than an unsupervised government employee, I'd like to see it. Those guys would park those trucks in their office if they could, to avoid having to get out and walk. I'm gonna be lucky if I don't end up in jail before I get out of this building, because they just will not move their trucks so I can get in and out of my shop. So I will not be sad to see those guys in the rearview mirror. So this is a prefab metal frame building. All the buildings down here are built this way. And it's kind of a pretty common construction method here in the United States. If you're outside of the country, you may not have seen buildings built like this, or it may not be as common where you are, but this is really common construction here. And you know, they do it because it's cheap. It's really cheap to throw up a building like this. You know, they prefab it in a factory somewhere, label all the parts, throw them on a truck, and then, you know, a small crew of iron workers or whoever can put up the structure of one of these buildings in, you know, I'd say a building like this, they probably do it in less than a day, and then come back and skin it. Probably take them a couple days to do that. But the problem is that these buildings are really poorly insulated, and this one is no exception. So all they do is really just roll out this blanket insulation. It has a kind of a foil backing to it. They roll that out and then screw the metal right over top of it. And it's basically just a vapor barrier. It probably has almost no insulation properties whatsoever. I'd be real surprised if this entire building is better than an R5. So yeah, it would have been way better if they would have lined the inside with metal and, you know, filled it with cellulose or spray foam or something like that. But they don't do that. They build them just as cheap as they possibly can, try to get the maximum amount of square footage. It's a lean-to construction, so it's like 13 feet to the peak here in the front, and then it goes down to about 11 feet in the back. And then I got this big rafter that separates the shop in half, so anything tall really has to stay over on the one side here. So here's my incoming power. I have 200 amps of 220 3-phase, and that's been enough for me. I did have a sub panel that was mounted here because I didn't have enough space in this small box, but as far as power goes, I've had plenty. Now, he told me when I moved in that if I needed to, I could get another 200 amps. There's a second 200 amp service right here that runs next door, but they basically just use that for storage. So I could have a second 200 amp service, and then basically I'd have to feed the next door unit, but it hasn't come to that. Anyway, I left this one trough and a couple of runs. One's for the compressor over here, and there's my furnace set up, and then I left the other one for the welder. Supposedly the guys moving in here are going to want the welding hookup and the compressor, and they're going to buy that from me, but I'll believe it when I see it. So this is the furnace that heats the whole place, and it does an okay job. It's pretty cold in here in the winter, but this is a Lennox pulse style furnace. So he's got it ducted into the office, and then these two ducts just blow out into the shop. And it's okay, it's pretty energy efficient. I can heat this whole space for, I don't know, I'd say my highest utility bill has never been more than about $200. So that's pretty good for a space this size, but this pulse furnace I'm not exactly sold on. It's extremely loud, and it hasn't been very reliable. I've replaced the gas valve, the blower motor, let's see, a couple of relays have burned out, and I forget, some part of a control went bad in it, and I need to have the burner pressure tested too. Well, I don't have to worry about it anymore, but it should be done. I know they can leak. And this is my compressor, and I kind of don't want to leave it, but I don't have 3-phase at the new shop, so if these guys want to take it, then maybe that's a better deal, and I'll just get a single-phase compressor that's ready to go. But this is an old Quincy 325. It's a 5 horsepower with an 80-gallon tank, and the cool thing about these is that they're pressure lubed, so it actually has an oil pump inside instead of just being a splash lube like most of the cheaper compressors. And then this one came out of a state highway department maintenance garage, and it was a backup compressor. They had a big screw compressor, and they used this one like just for a backup, so it never ran. It's from the 70s. I think it was built in the mid 70s sometime, and it has almost no hours on it. And I had to rebuild these poppet valves when I first got it because it sat for so long that they got all rusty. So I took the poppet valves apart, lapped all the surfaces, and replaced the gaskets, and yeah, it's been fine ever since. So you can see there's no check valve in these compressors. It just uses the poppet valves between the compressor and the tank, so it's still sitting at about 155 pounds of pressure, and it hasn't been turned on for at least a week. So it's an excellent compressor. And I had the tank ultrasonically tested when I brought it in here, and it's nice and thick, so there's no worries with that. It'll be running long after I'm dead. So a lot of guys have commented in the videos about the poor lighting, and it's true, it's not very good, but believe it or not, it's way better than what it used to be. So when I first moved in here, the lights that you see here in this bay, they were halfway over top of the office. They were actually centered in the bay, and when they built the office, they basically covered up half the lights. So I moved the lights all over this way, about, I don't know, 5 feet or so, in order to center them, you know, between the rafter and the office space, so you can have a lot better lighting. And then I added, let's see, I think I added at least half the lights that you see here I've added since I moved in. So it was super dark in here before I got in here, and it could definitely be a lot better. These old fluorescent light bulbs, you know, you get about a year out of them, and then you have to replace them, or they lose all their brightness. So another big problem down here is the floor, and all the floors down here are like this. So this building, from what I understand, the whole complex down here is actually built on top of an old foundation, an old slab. It was part of an old wooden warehouse, probably 100 years old, and it burned down maybe 25 years ago. And instead of tearing up the floor and replacing it, which is what they should have done, they tried to skim coat it with a skim coat of concrete, and you know, fix all the holes from where the concrete popped when the fire happened, and it just came out horrible. So you see a big, you probably can't see it on the camera, but there's a big patch here, and you know, there's just big divots, and the whole floor is an absolute disaster. And you see a big patch right here, and then back here in the back it's really bad. So this is where I had my welding area, but they put this super thin coat of concrete over top of what was already there, and every time I put something remotely heavy down, it chips a bit of that off, and I can't roll skates or anything over it. It just absolutely destroys it. Now the other problem too is that the building is basically built on a slab. So there is a foundation wall at the other end of the building, but on this end it's really just a slab. And so the walls basically are just bolted down to the slab, and then they're at the same level as the driveway. So you can imagine water just runs right into this place. And then the bottom frame of the doors has already rotted out, and you put a patch on it. I'll show you on the other side. It's actually, so the insulation's all pulled up where it's supposed to bolt to the floor, and then there's a bracket down here that's supposed to attach this door frame to the concrete. It's already rotted through, and you see how the wall kind of bulges out in multiple places. All the screws have popped and rotted through that lower frame where it's bolted to the slab. They never should have built it this way. I don't know if you guys can see it, but the roof also leaks really badly. And it usually happens in the springtime when they don't clean the gutters, and the water just backs up. It's a standing seam roof, but it's got several major leaks. I'll show you in the office where that's caused some big problems. So this is the inside of the office underneath of that spot where it's been leaking. You see it's actually eaten through the drywall and pretty much destroyed that. And then it's got a bunch of mold at the bottom of the wall. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I keep telling him that it leaks, and he never fixes it. Alright, I'll show you guys the office kind of area. So this room right here is sort of a little kitchenette, and I got a counter with a sink and everything, and just some empty space here. Got a small bathroom right there, and then this room here, the guy who was in here before me was a cabinet maker. It's a cabinet shop. Yeah, he did all the trim work, did a pretty good job with it. But he used this as kind of a showroom to show, like, custom cabinets and stuff. I never really had a use for this space, or the kitchen space, to be honest. I don't like to keep food down here because of the mice, so it's kind of wasted space. I use this as sort of my electronics work area, but really this was a wasted space as far as I'm concerned. And then this is the actual office area here that I use. And I had a couch and stuff, which has already been moved out. And this is the front door. Alright guys, I think that's going to be about it. I've got almost everything moved out of here. So I got the steel rack taken down, I got to move it, my welding tanks, toolboxes. I got most of the cabinets on some pallets. So I think one more trip with the rollback and we'll be done. All the machine tools and my forklift and stuff are out of here. And this forklift here, it's a Toyota. It's really nice. That belongs to the landlord, and he lets everybody use that. So that's one perk that's kind of cool. There's this Toyota forklift, and then he's got a John Deere loader that I can use, and then the community dock is really nice too. I mean, I have my own forklift, but still it's nice to have two sometimes. And overall it hasn't been too bad down here. I'm just ready to move on. And it was good for the point that I was at in my life. I was 27 years old when I moved in here, and I didn't have any money. I certainly couldn't have bought a building that was comparable to this one for what I'm paying for rent. If you guys have ever checked out, loans for commercial buildings, it's a different world from buying a house. You go to buy a house, and there's all these first-time home buyers, and FHA programs you can qualify for, and you can get a 30 or 40-year loan, super low interest rates. For commercial, it's a totally different ball game. You know, they're going to want at least 20% down, and you're going to be lucky to get a 10-year loan term. It's probably going to be more like 8 or 5 years, and your interest rate's going to be twice what you would pay for a home loan. And then you're going to have a big balloon payment at the end, because even with 20% down, they're not going to loan you all the money that you need. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, and I'm going to be closing on the new house/shop in 2 more days. So as soon as we get the keys, I'll give you guys a sneak peek of the new location. Yeah, another thing that drives me crazy down here, especially when I'm trying to make videos, there's never a time where it's quiet down here. There's always somebody around. You know, it's Saturday morning, the week of the 4th of July, and there's, what, 4 cars parked down here, a couple of guys working, got a forklift running in the background. You know, you come down here at midnight on a Saturday and there'll be somebody here. So I definitely won't miss that. It'd be nice to have some peace and quiet.